I would love to give some practical advice about how I use it, because I've experimented big time with what the best way to do this is, because there is no one way. So I want to talk about a lot of different ways that you can run this. So first of all, let me take a little bit of survey just so I know. How many people here have in-ears, like at their team? Okay, so most of you. How many people don't have in-ears? Okay, so there's enough of you that you're probably wondering, how the heck would I do this without in-ears? So what I'm going to do is, this is how I chose to do this, because there's a lot of different levels that you can do things at. So I'm going to walk you through the most basic possible setup that you could have that could support and take your ministry to the next level with music technology, all the way to probably the most advanced possible thing that you could do, and just call it a survey. You're not going to be able to take it all in 1 hour, and so what I'll say lastly is, I'm a local guy, so if you're local, let's just get together, because I could geek out about this stuff all day. So if you want me to go to your church and be like, hey, here's our setup, like, what can we do? Like, I'll help you do that. You're like, hey, my pastor gave me $200 to do stuff with. I'll help you figure out how to spend that $200. Whatever you need, you just have a question. Maybe you're a total Ableton geek, and you're like, oh yeah, how did you transition to singing with the stop buttons and blah 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 blah. And I'll be like, oh, here's how I did it. Yeah. So that's my offer to you. Whatever you need, I'm here for you. But I may not know the answer also.
Eric, can I interrupt you just for 1 second?
Yeah.
If there's anybody, you guys in the back, I don't know if there's any sacrificial people that feel like they have strong tailbones. But there is some floor space. There are a lot of people in the back. I'm sitting on the floor up here. I don't know if you guys, if you feel like the floor is better than the hallway, you're more than welcome. But just to throw that out there.
There's one seat right here.
There's two seats here. Two seats.
One beside
we got a floor champ.
The
buddy.
floor looks
also,
nice and comfortable.
There's also a chair right here. So point out seats for us, guys. Point out some seats. One right up here. Yeah, there you go. Thanks so much.
Servant leaders right here.
There we go.
That's right.
Two seats up there, one here. A little cozy one up here if you want. There you go. Perfect. We made it happen. Awesome. Thanks, Eric.
Cool. All right. So, the journey of all of this invisible music technology that helps our worship. So the first thing that I'll start talking to all the people who don't have in-ears. The best thing that you can do right now for your team is get your team on a click track. Amen, right? Yeah. Yep. So the click track, here's what I tell my team. Like, we don't follow the click track plays to us. That's kind of a joke, but the idea is that we don't use a click track so that it's like, because we struggle to stay in time and we have to follow it. If we struggle to stay in time, we got to get better at music first. But what click track does is it just provides this neutral, objective way that the musicians can communicate with one another, and we can kind of like agree on the tempo and things. So don't think of the click track as in my drummer is terrible at keeping time. The click track's not going to fix that. The click track's only just going to highlight more that he can't keep time. So if your drummer can't keep time, then let's develop him so that he can keep time. Let's find him a resource. Let's get him practicing so that he can. But we do click track for more for the band. So if you are in a situation where you have monitor wedges, pretty much the only thing that you can do is let the drummer start to run click track. And this is totally acceptable. When I first started, I'm a drummer, and I played in a band for many years in the States, and did the traveling thing and all that stuff. But when you get going, you kind of like want to keep up with like all of the big boys and stuff, and so you want to come across as excellent. So the best way we could do that is do click track. But we're doing kind of small shows when we got started. So what I did is I just ran a click track. I got a Tama rhythm watch, That's probably one of the best ones. It's like maybe 10 years old now, but it's one of the best tools. It's only $100. Hopefully a reasonable investment for your church. But Tama, so Tama, Tama, and the product is called Rhythm Watch. And what this does is it allows you to program each and every one of your the tempos for the songs in it, and then it has a headphone jack. So what happens is if your drummer probably doesn't mind playing with headphones anyway, so he doesn't destroy his ears. So he wants to put something in his ears anyway. So let it be a click track. And so plug in the headphones into the click track and start having your drummer like count time. Now this is tough because in this scenario, it's not ideal because your worship leader doesn't really have control over that. And so you have to spend a lot of time building that relationship with your drummers to be able to do it. Do not underestimate how much of a relationship you need to build with your drummer, because you can have some real crash and burn moments if you do not start to work together. So put the drummer on the click track, kind of agree when they start tempos, and rehearse how you make transitions. Practice transitions more than you practice the songs is my advice. And you get that drummer on a click track. Okay, so that should help with guys on wedges. Now, the next step that you guys can probably do is figure out how can we run in-ears without investing in those ridiculously expensive like Avion systems or in-ear monitors. Well, there really are ways. When I started with a church plant, when I decided to go into ministry, like I was used to in a band at this point playing with full ear monitors and everything, and so it's like I'll go to a church plant and they have nothing. And I was like, dang it, like, what are we gonna do? Like, I'm so used to like this technology and how great the band can sound when we can play together like this, but I don't have access to this. And so I did my research, and it was just like a lot of Amazon.com and forums and stuff, and just realized that all I have to do is get a headphone amplifier, right? A headphone amplifier, you could get one, for your computer, headphone amplifier is just a way to power any signal to your headphones. That's what a headphone amplifier is. And you can get them for so cheap. I found one online, this was years ago, so they probably can find it for less and also better, but I found a headphone amplifier that had 4 headphone outputs for like $90. There you go. You buy 2 of those, you probably can cover your entire band. For $200, you can start running in-ears. Because every board has an aux send. What it allows you to do is when you mix, it takes all the channels and sends it to a bus. The bus is your master bus. It's your left and your right for the audio for front of house. But an aux send is an additional bus. It's not so you send your master and you have an additional. Every board has it. So even the most basic board usually has 2, or 3, or sometimes 4. Like you find a Mackie console and be like, oh, here's 4 aux outputs. So you run 4 XLRs from your board to your stage that have your different mixes. You run them to the headphone amplifiers. You run headphone extensions from the headphone amplifiers to all of the different people on your team, and boom, you have an in-ear system for like $200. So it's totally reasonable, and I did it for years, like in a church plant scenario where we had no money, because there's better things to spend money on than Avion systems when you're a church plant. You can make a real difference with your limited budgets, and you shouldn't be buying like Avion systems. Like, that's ridiculous. So buy those headphone amplifiers, and then you can start running in-ears. Now, once you're on in-ears, now the fun begins, because now you have the ability with in-ears to be able to hear stuff that the audience doesn't hear, which can allow for an extreme amount of control. On a basic level, a lot of churches run a music director, and so a music director, this is a great way. Like I personally don't do this, but I'll tell you why in a second. But a music director is a great way, and I've used music directors before. And basically, you give a guy on your team a microphone that's not piped into the house mix. It's piped into the inner mix, and this guy just cues the band, so that way you guys can be playing, and when especially when you're starting out, or if you're on limited rehearsal time, where it's like, dang, oh, does Cornerstone, do we have 2 bars before we go into this chorus, or is it the 1 bar? I can't remember. When we did the vamp, do we build for 8 bars or 12 bars? Oh no, everybody's panicking and doesn't know what to do. MD to the rescue. So the music director is there with it. You want the guy that knows the music the best. You guys are playing along, and he just goes, chorus. 1, 2, 3, and everyone's like, thank the Lord. We all know where we are, right? And the in-ears is what affords you this opportunity. A music director, you don't have to program it. That's the nice thing. It's like, I'm going to show you all this computer stuff. Music director, you don't have to program. It's just like your drummer, how you have this relationship where like, hey, we're going to start the song, so start the click. You're just taking that to the next level. Now you got a musician who knows the instrument, the arrangements inside and out, and he can just give the cues. This is great for some free worship moments, right? We all have these moments where we just finish a song. Man, the Spirit of God is filling His people in the room, and we just want to pour our hearts out, and maybe we just need to do a chorus again. And so the music director is kind of has this good relationship. The worship leader knows he's doing the chorus again, so he just says, hold on G, just so he can wait for him. So now we're hold on G, and now like the worship leader gives a little bit of a cue, and the music director can go, all right, chorus, 1, 2, 3. And now we're in the chorus, and it's just this free moment that we didn't plan, that we can kind of stay in tune with, and all because you get in sync with your music director. And the more you build up that relationship, man, the smoother everything can go. Music director is like, boom, the way to go. It's an awesome basic thing. If you can get your team on in-ears, get a music director. It's a great leadership position, right? So you're the worship leader, and oftentimes you're the only leader. Well, what better way than to have, why don't you have 4 music directors that rotate each week of the month or something like that? And we want to create leadership positions for people who have great gifts that can serve the church. Music director is one of those. We have music directors at our church. We use them in a little bit different way, but my encouragement is just that have leadership positions where people can exercise their gifts. All right. Any questions about that so far? Just a basic in-ear setup. I don't want to get all the way to the end. If you have questions.
Yeah, you were saying there's a reason why you personally don't use MD. Yeah. So I don't know if you have...
Cool, yeah. The reason I don't is because I use a virtual MD. Because the virtual MD doesn't make mistakes. That's why. And I'm going to get into that. I'm going to show you kind of my whole rig with virtual MD. And for me, that's, that's the way to go. Sometimes do both. Like, so my friend's a pastor at Gateway Church. Gateway in Dallas? They put out a lot of great worship music. I never know how much like Canada knows about what's going on in the States. I'm American, so anyway, they do both. So they have like a director that like calls, set cues here, but then they have a live music director to catch like moments. And they have everything, man. They're tech directors on the in-ears. Their front of house director, their monitor engineers on the in-ears. Everybody's like talking all the time. It's like, how do these guys actually do this? But they're used to it. You'd be surprised if you get efficient. You'd be surprised how much talking you can handle in your in-ears while you're leading worship. It's really helpful. It's like a security blanket. Honestly, it made me feel weird, especially click. If anybody hasn't played the click, oh man, you're in for a rude awakening. I always forget how much people like hate that first experience until I get a team member who hasn't played on a click before. They're like, "You guys play with this beeping in your head?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, we do." You just like tune it out and you just find yourself playing in time. So don't worry about it. Do it for like a year. You'll find a year later that I know it takes a while to acclimate. I'm sorry to burst your bubble on it. Okay. So that's if you don't have Avions or wireless in-ear monitors. You can get those headphone extensions. So then after that, whether you do that or you have Avions, if you have Avions, you know how that works, right? If you have in-ear monitors, you already know how that works. If anybody has any questions about what is good equipment to get, what do I prefer and what do I think is best, like I'm happy to answer those questions. Maybe at the end of the session if you guys have any of those. But for now, I'm going to assume that, okay, everybody's kind of got their inner rig and is ready to go. what's the best way to start with any other practical tools? Now, so we're talking about tracks, so this is kind of what I'm going to spend the rest of the time on. There are a few reasons to run tracks. The first and most practical reason is, I think all of us, myself included, end up in a situation where Sunday morning, yeah? Oh man, Eric, I'm just like, I got up this morning and I'm just so sick. I just don't know if I can make it to church this morning. Oh, can you cover me? It's like, oh dang, this is my bass player. How, like, my first service is at 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't know about you guys, but it's like, I'm not finding a bass player, at 6 o'clock in the morning. Nobody's answering their phone. So it's like, cool, I have no bass player. Well, what am I gonna do? Well, if I have the bass already pre-recorded on a backing track, that's what I can do. I can just play it on the backing track, and the congregation doesn't even know. They don't even know which one's playing the bass, So they don't care so much. So on a practical level, tracks are a way where you can have everybody's part on the team. So maybe your church, maybe you just struggle like, man, we just don't have a lot of electric guitar players. It's like, I got like 3 drummers, but 0 electric guitar players. Like, how did that happen? And so maybe you want to balance sound. So what you do is you just run electric guitar on the backing tracks. And there are resources for this, like galore now. So let me give you 2. There's a site called multitracks.com, and all the songs probably you all do, right? It's your Bethel and Gateway and Hillsong and Elevation. Most of your popular worship materials are going to be on multi-tracks, and they'll actually take the recordings and have all of the parts stemmed out and available for you so that you can plug into a player. I'm going to get to the player in a second, but available to you, so that way it's like, hey, we don't have electric guitar players, we always have the electric guitar part on a backing track, so that way that's covered. It fills up the sound. And there's lots of guys. I know guys that are, leading in churches, like in the middle of nowhere, like Indiana, and they just, like, everybody like works at a chicken farm and doesn't play, guitar. So they only have 2 musicians on their team for like 800 people in their church, and they still want to have a sound. So I know a guy who just leads with his buddy who's a musician, and they put everything in backing tracks, and they just play live, and it's great, and nobody cares because they're all chicken farmers. So they just are just happy to be led in worship, and the Spirit of God is there, and people are worshiping Him. And so there doesn't have to be a cookie cutter way that you use it, but it can be beneficial to you if you have all of these parts. A second way to use it, and this is kind of maybe more of where I'm at with the backing tracks, is I usually have the musicians that I need for a Sunday, but now it's a sonic thing. Gone are the days, absolutely gone are the days where simple drums, bass, acoustic guitar, electric guitar, and a piano is the sound. Gone. Most music, and really for some time actually, to be honest, has a lot more parts to it. They're not any more major parts, so I'm not talking about like, it's not like, the sitar has become like really popular in popular music. No, it's usually little things. It's like a little atmospheric thing. It's a pad. It's lots of extra percussion, right? And nothing's worse than, just somebody who's like, oh, I don't know how to play the drums, but I would just love to play tambourine on stage. And it's like, oh, please don't play tambourine, on stage. It's just nice to just have the tambourine be perfectly in time, right? So there's all of these extra little elements in music, and they're subtle, and people may not in the congregation even notice. Like, you may not have even realized, last night the guys, are running extra sounds and tracks, but they are. The thing is because sonically to present music with integrity requires more parts than there are musicians on stage. Also, there's some technical limitations to being a human. It's like some modern music production is like, man, I'm gonna go to this like I'm gonna do this like really atmospheric clean thing, and then all of a sudden the chorus, it's like all the effects are gone and I'm playing a big power chord. And it's like, well, unless you have like some really fancy MIDI setup on your pedal board that allows you to cut like 7 effects all at once, then it's like, hey, maybe I'm gonna play this electric guitar part, and maybe that little rhythm part is gonna go to the backing track right there, and then I'm gonna play something else. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you run backing tracks. At first, you can just download them, like multitracks.com. Another one is loopcommunity.com. I forgot to mention that one. And so what's cool about Loop Community is it's a lot of people like myself that just are like, hey, I have my own arrangement of Cornerstone. I'm going to put my backing tracks on, so if people like my arrangement better, they can do that, and so it feels custom, because sometimes when you buy the original, like everyone kind of knows, because they hear the tracks come on, you're like, it sounds exactly like the record they own. So sometimes Loop Community, if you want to be like a little bit more custom, you can buy somebody else that's taken the time and lives in his grandma's basement and has no job and has time to like make this stuff. You can buy his version, and then it's like, oh yeah, like I'm vibing this, man, nice custom arrangement. I really feel like this works for our church, and you're like, yeah, it does. So great resources out there for downloading this stuff. Now the question is, what are you going to play it back on? And so if you are just running, tracks, if you've just been running click track on a rhythm watch, it's like, well, you don't have a playback source for multi-tracks. So what you have to do is you have to have some other playback source, and multitracks.com, I believe, there's a few, like Band in Hand makes one, but multitracks.com is a pretty good player. They make an iPhone app and an iPad app that you can download all of the tracks and put it just in the app. And then what it does is out of the headphone output, so when you have stereo, you have a left source that goes to your left ear, and you have a right source that goes to your right ear. So the multi-tracks does it so that way you can send out of the left ear, you can send a click track, and out of the right ear, it sends all of the tracks. So the way this works is you take an 1/8 inch jack out of your phone or your iPad for this app, and you plug it in, it splits the signal, and you get a splitter till it goes to 2 1/4 inch, or it goes to RCA, the little red and white one, like on your stereo system. It doesn't matter what you do, but you go to a DI box, a direct box, and then you can send the 2 out. So you send the 1 XLR out of the DI for all the in-ear mixes for the click track. You send the other one, gets mixed in front of house. It has all of the sounds. It has the guitars, the drums, the atmospheric pads, all of that stuff. And it goes to the front of house sound engineer, and it goes to your mix too. So you hear both. You hear click, 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 and the loops and all the stuff. You hear both in your in-ears. But the house, they don't hear the click track. They just hear all the sounds. So now in the click track, if all of this stuff is pre-recorded, you have to know where you're at, because you can't just start playing and then like the tambourine comes in 2 bars into your song and you're like, dang it, man, the computer tambourine player is worse than the human tambourine player. So what it has is, with the click track, is it has the music director, the virtual music director, has 1, 2, 3, 4, chorus, 1, 2, 3, 4. You're playing. It's like bridge, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it counts you in, so everyone knows each transition as you make it. It cues you along the way. You can practice it with your team at your rehearsals and everything. Yeah.
Is it okay if I ask a question?
Sure.
Great. I'm just curious. So when you send like the one line out to your board, which has all the tracks on it, it's not separated for your front of house guy or girl. So it's like, do you find that any of those tracks need to be EQ'd so that they sound good in the room?
Yes, that's a great question. So the apps like multitracks.com
Yeah.
has your first source of EQ is to just re-level it, so you can be like, oh dang, that tambourine is killing it in the house, so you can just pull it down on the fader on this. If you want any custom control, because it's on a mono channel, you have to EQ the whole channel,
Right.
and that's just kind of the negative.
And you would EQ it like if you played it out of like Logic or something, you just EQ it right there.
No, because it doesn't have an EQ on the multi-tracks player. The thing for the phone in the iPad app is to make it as simple as possible. So it just has like the 6 parts, and then you just like move the levels of it, and then somebody at front of house, when it goes to the board, they can like change the EQ. They can boost the low end a little bit, take out the high end. The multi-tracks that are made ahead of time are pretty good though. So if it sounds off in your system, generally your system is off. And so you would want to just make a graphic EQ, or parametric EQ change to your front of house board, because usually the tracks are done pretty well. But if you had to make an adjustment to the track, you can either do it with the volume on the phone or the iPad, or you can make it just on the EQ on the board. Some people experience that there's too much dynamics. In other words, parts get too loud and too soft, because generally some churches in their smaller environments just play everything quieter, so the backing tracks are too loud. So those people either just turn the whole thing down so it's lower in the mix, or you can put a compressor on that individual channel to kind of flatten out the dynamics. So there's a little bit of processing, but if you're looking for more custom control, then it's time to upgrade to the next level of what I'm going to talk about. Yeah.
What is the name of that app?
Playback. That's what it is. Yeah. Good call. Thank you. But multitracks.com is, I think it should have information about it.
And
So-
prime for Loop community.
And it's prime for Loop Community. Cool. Thanks. Yeah, cool. So we got some guys who use this stuff. That's awesome. These are good. These are really great tools to get started with this stuff. The other thing is the rehearsal capability. Man, because now everybody on your team can download this. So if you've bought the multi-tracks, for the whatever song you're doing for Sunday, now everybody on your team can log into your account and they can practice and they can solo their line so they can learn how to play it. They can mute their line and listen to the rest of the band and play along. And it's a great rehearsal tool. So even if you don't use it for Sunday, in fact, if you're kind of nervous about using it for Sunday, just use it for rehearsal for your team. It's a great way for your musicians to learn the parts and start to learn to play by ear and to practice along. So, definitely. All right. So then, so that's a stereo arrangement, right? If maybe you're like, cool, I don't want to invest in multitracks.com, this seems like a lot of work. All I would like to do is I came up with this sweet pad myself, and I just want to play that. You could just do it on your iPhone. You could just record your own in GarageBand, your own track to the tempo, record it in GarageBand, and bounce it down with a click track on the left. And because in GarageBand you have a click track, so you just say, hey, that comes out the left channel. You pan your music that you make to the right. You bounce it down, you throw it in iTunes, and you literally go into iTunes and you just give it to your drummer on the phone, and they press play, and you follow along. That's like the cheap man's backing tracks. I did that for years. So after I started, I had the click track. I was the only one. We started playing with backing tracks, and we just made our own, and I just uploaded them to an iTunes playlist. Like, it's really that simple. You do it on GarageBand. You're like, man, I love this patch, and we're not going to play that live, so let's record this in GarageBand and put it in our phone, and boom, you got that. So many ways to do stereo using the stereo out. One for click and cues, one for your tracks. Okay. So then you get into multi-tracks. So now, welcome Ableton. So Ableton is kind of like the multi-tracks player in this app that just allows you to kind of level out, some different pre-recorded parts for you, but like on steroids. There is like endless capability here. Basically, Ableton, for this use, it's actually a complete digital audio workstation, a DAW. It's just like Logic or Pro Tools. You guys have probably used those or heard of those at least. Ableton is just another one of those. But what Ableton excels at is its management of playing little audio pieces whenever you want. Where a traditional DAW looks like this, you guys are probably used to that, where everything's on lines and the audio records in each line, and you press spacebar in Pro Tools or Logic, and it just plays back all of the audio that you recorded, and you can mix it on faders, and that's kind of what we're used to. Ableton takes that to a little bit higher of a degree and allows some flexibility for you to choose audio clips at different times and change tempos and do all kinds of things. And so this is what I'm going to spend a little bit of time kind of helping you guys get familiar with if you haven't seen. Any Ableton users here? Cool, we got like 5 or 6 guys. Okay, at a basic level, if you just want to transfer, if you want to get into Ableton because you're like, man, I see us being able to use these tools some days, just get Ableton right away. There's an Ableton Lite that's only $99, and if you're a student, they even have a discount on that. And it has, what it allows is it allows up for 16 scenes. I'm going to talk about scenes, but those are just songs basically, more or less. 16, it allows 16 scenes, which can cover your playlist for Sunday. So that's a great way to get into Ableton. It's only $99, and you can use it to start running cool click tracks and basic backing tracks and kind of save everything. But basically here, this column on the right, you'll see that, I know it's hard to read here, but this is basically my set. So it says, mine says 1, melody, medley, 2, some initials that stand for You Brought Me Back to Life, and it just has my set list right here. These are basically, it's just like a set list that you play on Sunday. These are just my songs that I'm doing. Each song in it has the BPM. So Ableton has kind of a code where when you put the tempo in here, it plays back everything at that tempo. Okay? So right here, like You Brought Me Back to Life, this song, sorry, this is an intro. I'll talk about how things sequence together in a second. But this song is at 106 BPM. So what I do is, all I do is type in the name of the song, and I do semicolon, 106 BPM, and that's how I get my click track. So if I were to, let's do Cornerstone. I don't actually do any backing tracks for Cornerstone. So Cornerstone is my 8th song here, and it's at 76 BPM. I have this mapped to a key on my computer to start it, the number 8. So what I do is I said that it's at 76 BPM, so when I hit it,
1, 2, 3, 4.
And that's my click track. I've turned down the click track so it's not so annoying for you. It's really a lot louder in your ears. But so it plays, and so that's just 76 BPM. That's just for us to play along to. I've also included a director. That's that intro when I started it.
1, 2, 3.
So we all start on time. So when we're coming from the last song, it's like I could be praying over a pad. I could just say a word of encouragement to the church. I could be responding to something kind of in the room. I could be inviting a pastor to pray. I could be totally free. And just whenever the person is done doing whatever they're doing, our music director hits the 8.
2, 3, 4.
Bum, 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 right? And we're in. We're all in together. Super seamless transition. And that's at a very basic level. That's how you can use Ableton. You can just get your scenes with your tempos in it. Now, for those of you who are Ableton users, you'll be like, hey, that's not the Ableton click that I know. You're right, it's not. I think the Ableton click is annoying. This is what the Ableton click sounds like. Here. It's this little thing, this little white and black dot there in the top left. Here.
1, 2, 3,
Yeah,
4.
right? That's the Ableton click. Cool. The reason I struggle with the Ableton click is it also doesn't do subdivisions. Well, technically it can, but you get into whole certain things with, you hear how
1,
it accents
2,
it.
3,
You hear
4.
this, cool, right? So you hear the accent. So the accent you hear really well, but in the mix you don't hear the other beats as well unless you turn it up really loud. And if I find that if you don't know where one is, you have bigger problems than dealing with Ableton. So I had a season where I set all of my tempos to 1/4 so I could have even clicks. And that gets hard because of how you end up cueing things. So just trust me that sometimes it's just better to make a new click altogether. So I have this row. So what happens is here's my songs in the right, and so you're like, what is all this other stuff? Well, all of these are audio tracks. So right here it says click MIDI, and basically I've just taken an instrument, a drum module, like a virtual drum module. That's kind of what I can do. It can play software instruments or it can play audio back. So in this case, this MIDI channel is playing software instruments. Are you guys familiar with software instruments?
Yeah.
Hopefully. So it's like if you're playing in GarageBand and you're playing your piano, in that you're not recording audio, you're playing MIDI, right? From a MIDI keyboard, and then it renders it as audio. That's different than recording a piano in a studio with microphones and capturing audio, right? So Ableton can play back both. It can play back an audio channel or it can play back a MIDI channel. So for my click track, for instance, I'm choosing a MIDI channel, and I've chosen a synthesizer that has this right here, down here. This is like a little MIDI grid. You can kind of see as I scroll up and down, it's got like little piano notes, black, white, black, white, white, black, white, right? That's equivalent to a piano. And I've programmed to the grid a shaker and a kind of cowbell thing, and that's my sound for my click. So it's not hugely important, but I just want you, for those Ableton users, to know where that's coming from.
1, 2, 3, 4.
That's where, sorry, those are the cues. I turned down my, okay, so there's my click track, right? So that's the cowbell and the shaker. So that's one MIDI thing that I do. The second MIDI thing, so you'll say cues MIDI. So see this right here? It says cues MIDI. It might be hard to read. But basically what I do is Loop Community makes a set of director cues, pre-recorded, that you can just program with MIDI. So right here, you guys probably can't see this, but see where the piano roll is here? Okay, this piano roll, it has all of the different sections and everything you could want a music director to say. So it's got like counting for 6/8 keys. It says worship leader, guitar, bass, acoustic, drums, all in, full band, breakdown, build it up, solo, repeats, full band, kick it in, break, swell, trash can, last time, end, turnaround, down bridge. Or you get the idea, right? It has everything. So what I'll do is I'll go in for an entire song and map out on the beats all of the cues. So I can make a custom arrangement. It's like, man, we're gonna do this thing where we just do the chorus like 4 times because, man, the church is, and if I plan that ahead of time, then I can put it all into these director cues. So at a very basic level, I can just have a click track and cues, and that's what you guys can get started with in Ableton, and basically replicate what multitracks.com or loopcommunity.com does for you. You can start to make on your own, which is one step towards really being able to express your creativity of your team. So then what you want to start doing is start adding multiple tracks. Now, just like the gentleman back here asked the question, like, oh dang, what if this doesn't sound good, like this tambourine is too loud, or this guitar has too much mid-range, and you want the ability to mix everything independently. That's what you have Ableton for. So at first level, you have total mix control over every single channel. So here's an example of my backing tracks. I have keys, and I have like an ace tone recorded, an alarm, an attack synth, B3, club sound, piano arpeggio, strings. All right, so these are some of my example backing tracks in this particular song. So let's say it's like, dang, I get into a venue that's different than my usual venue, and that ace tone sounds too loud. Well, now I can take that ace tone and I can just turn it down. Or I can click on the ace tone and I can drop in any effects, EQs, compression. I can drop it down here and just mix just that one channel, right? So I have the ability to do that. So even if I only, still out of Ableton, just send, like what I'm doing right now, I'm just sending the 1/8 inch jack out, I can do all the mixing inside Ableton. For an extra level of control, I can actually hook up an audio interface that has multiple outputs and assign each of my individual sounds to different outputs. So now my front of house engineer has control. Not only do I have control and I can mix it how I artistically envision the sound to be, but now my front of house engineer can compensate for what I can't hear in the house because I'm on stage. Yeah, shoot.
Could you just tell me, like, what's the physical hardware that you're doing to do multiple outputs to different iPads? Is it all like digital wireless?
So it's not multiple iPads. It's you're actually sending it from an audio interface. So what an audio interface does is it acts as a go-between between your laptop and actual analog audio. Analog being like stuff that gets traveled in an XLR. So like if I have a mic that's plugged in on an XLR, I'm actually sending analog electrical audio to the front of house that a person can mix. So what you want to do is you want to send XLR analog audio to your front of house audio engineer. And an audio interface can be like, maybe you've heard of like brands like Motu or Apogee or Universal Audio. There's a number of makers of audio interfaces, and they all look different. There's little desktop ones that you see like on Apple ads of people like making music, and it will have like a knob. That will be like an audio interface, and on the back of it, it could have 2 analog outs. It could have 4. It could have 8. You could have a whole matrix and have 32 analog outs, right? So you can get audio interfaces that have any amount of outputs that you desire. So what my team uses is I use a 10-channel out Universal Audio Apollo, and here's how I break it down. I break it down into stereo keys, stereo percussion, stereo vox, stereo guitars, mono click, mono cues. So what I'm able to do is what a lot of churches do, larger churches do, is to fill out the congregation sound and to encourage singing. We pre-record all choruses with gang vocals. So I get like 10 guys in a room, and we're like, let's just belt Cornerstone. And we belt it, and we put it in Vox, and so when we get to the big Cornerstone, we just subtly blend it in. Nobody even knows it's there. Only you guys know. Only you guys know that it's there. But what happens is it just encourages just a little bit more singing. People don't feel afraid. They feel like everyone around them is singing, and they want to give more, right? As soon as people feel timid to sing, they stop. And we don't want people to stop singing, because when they sing, they're filled with the Holy Spirit, they're encouraged, they're blessed, right? So we pre-record vocals, we pre-record extra guitars to make it sound thicker and punchier. We pre-record extra layers of keys to make it sound punchier. I've had up to 120 extra things going on in my mix. So yeah.
Is latency an issue with some interfaces?
Latency is only an issue if you're sending something into the audio interface and back out.
Okay.
So if you, in this case, all you're doing is playing everything from it. So if it takes time to process it, it still comes out at the same time, and you play to that. So if it's 10 milliseconds late, then the whole band's playing 10 milliseconds late.
Okay.
Yeah. But a lot of us, so what we do is we also have other computers, and we run stuff through this that's like audio with it, and then you have to watch for latency. And so there's a bunch of ways that you can optimize to not have latency. But in this particular scenario, you wouldn't have to worry about it. Yeah.
So what I mean, like, Ableton's latency is a lot better than Logic, so the way it process is a lot better for some reason. So
Oh,
yeah,
that's great. I didn't know that.
yeah. Plus
Cool.
the Apollo uses has like a separate CPU for it, so it's a lot better.
Yes, that's why we use the Apollo, so that way we can offload all of our plug-in processing for for audio. So I run my entire vocal chain, kick, snare through an Apollo, so that way we can make it sound fatter, and it has very little latency. It's great. Cool. So what you can do is, so you'll see down here it says Audio 2. And what you do is you just go into this menu and you select your audio interface when you have one plugged in. I don't have one plugged in right now. And I can send it to each pair of outputs. So now my audio engineer just has a set of 8 stereo or 10 channels that he can mix everything for, and he knows when I'm sending it. So if he hears the backing track coming in and I recorded it slightly hot for that particular song, he can just pull it back, and he doesn't have to affect all the other, things. If I recorded the synth bass and it's just like resonating at 40 hertz and totally crushing everybody, well then he can just EQ just the synth bass out of it. So we have that flexibility built in here. Now, I think I only have a little bit of time left, so I'm gonna jump ahead. Sorry, there's just a lot to cover, and I'm happy to talk with anybody about this in further detail. But one of the myths that I want to kind of address is that Ableton doesn't allow for spirit-led worship. A lot of us in here want the flexibility to go somewhere with our songs. And so I want to say 2 things to that. First of all, I'm a firm believer that the Spirit of God moves just as much in our preparation as he does in our execution. So don't be afraid to create moments ahead of time. I know my church really well. Most of you guys know your churches really well. If you've led worship with a community, they become your family and you know them really well. So I know moments it's like, dang, when we do this song, I know we're just going to sit here and we're just going to take it in. Man, I'm going to invite people up for prayer. I'm going to do this chorus like 6 times because our church is just going to go to town on it. And you know what? That's the Spirit of God in my preparation. Show me that, man, we need to spend time here. And so I'll build that in. You'll be surprised how much free worship moments in, like, if you go to Hillsong conference or something like that, you'll be like, dang, they just have so many free worship moments. All of that is totally programmed. I promise you, it's totally programmed. They're dealing with so much more than just Ableton cues when it comes to their conference or their concert, that they don't have room to just be like making decisions left and right about which direction they want to go. Now they do have some of that, so I don't want to say no, but I just want to first encourage you that you can allow the Spirit of God to lead you in your preparation. So don't be afraid to just stick to an arrangement, because sometimes it's better for your musicians and sometimes it's better for your congregation if everybody knows what they're doing. But however, let's say there's still moments where it's like, man, God is leading us a different way. You can actually take the songs and they can automatically sequence, because these songs go one into another. You can tell Ableton whether it should go right into it or if it should stop and wait for you to cue the next one. So a lot of worship leaders will actually break up their entire song into its parts and sequence them. So instead of having like 1 line for a song, it could have 5 lines for a song. Now, I don't do all 5 lines when I do this, because generally I know I'm at least going to do a majority of it. I'm not going to get to the very end of the song and go, yeah, let's do that second verse again, right? There's usually a predictable, like, man, I'm going to do the song, and then maybe I'm going to do the chorus again, or maybe I'm going to do a bridge and a chorus again. And so if I need to break out something for flexibility, I'll just break out a section of it. But you can break out the sections. And what Ableton does is in time, perfectly in time, and this is what DJs do. They go wherever they want, and they do it in time. That's what Ableton is built for. Ableton is built for your free worship. It was built for DJs, but they didn't realize that they were actually building it for free worship. Because you can actually have somebody on Ableton, and man, the Worship Central guys, right, do this. When I went to the Worship Central conference in London, they were hardcore. They have a guy just dedicated to running this. That's his job in the band. They have a guy just running this, and what he'll do is, if they want to do a chorus again, then he has to cue the chorus within a bar. Anywhere within the bar. If it's a bar to go to the chorus, the music director's like, all right, let's go to the chorus. and they're like, oh, okay, go in the chorus, and he hits the cue somewhere in that bar, boom, the backing track syncs up. The strings are there, man, your tambourine is there, all of your stuff is there and available for you if you want it to be. And it can automatically be sequenced, so that way if you're not worried about you're sticking to the map, it just automatically goes to the next song and you can cue that.
So like, I'm not that familiar with this kind of stuff, so if you think of background track, are you basically just copying and pasting so that you can sequence all these things, or and chopping it up? And
Yep.
Okay.
So some of the multi-tracks are chopped up for you, so you don't have to do the work. But sometimes, a lot of times, if you want to get to this fine level of detail, then you'll have to chop it up yourself, which you can do in Ableton, because it has this view, so you can dump the tracks in this view, and then you can actually cut it up. Or you can use your DAW of choice. You can use Logic or Pro Tools, whatever you're comfortable with, and you can cut those up yourself. Now there's an art to it. A lot of this takes experience, right? You have to, you plug it in and you're like, oh dang, we went back to that bridge. It's just like, I heard the string line go, da, and it like cut off. So you have to learn like when you can make cuts. And so that's why Loop Community starts very basic and is just loops. So whenever you go from one section to another, it's just, it doesn't matter because the loop can end and start and it doesn't matter. So I kind of deal with this more on like atmospheric things. Like I want to like kind of, you know, just like twiddling soundscape noise, or, you know, like or a string with a huge ginormous reverb on it. So I can't cut those sections if I don't want to. Now there are ways to overlap it, and this gets really complex, and I've done the craziest things to make what I want work. And it just takes a lot of work and asking and having a network, having guys like us. It's like, hey, we all kind of like want to do some elements of this maybe. So it's like, you know, having each other's emails and being like, hey, dude, how'd you do that? Because I really want to do this. And it's like, oh yeah, I did this. And it's like, yeah. And then you're able to do it, right? We create a community, and that's why Loop Community, right? The whole thing is this is becoming a community. It's the church working together worldwide to have this stuff so that we can all improve the excellence in what we're doing. And so so I encourage you to join in with that community, and we can have a local one here. We can help each other out on this stuff. Yeah.
Who do you recommend to operate?
That's a great question. So I've done everything. Sometimes drummers are used to running the click tracks, and that's usually how a lot of teams have it set up. So by default, drummers do. But I increasingly have keyboardists do it, and keyboardists are probably what a lot of the bands and stuff we look up to use, and that's because they have a pedal, so they can like hold their pad and then cue in the next song, where a drummer could be like wanting to swell into an intro, right? So sometimes you can give it to both, or depending on the set, you know. So it's up to you. Don't give it to your worship leader. That looks dopey. But I've given it to a bass player. There's really no rules. I've given it to an electric guitar player, right? It just it depends on who I trust to handle the transitions, and so I would give it to your best musician who can follow you and you can trust with your cues, and you can build a relationship to work towards leading the church in worship best. So I'd give it to your best musician.
That's good.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me. I could say a lot more. I'll say one quick thing. The possibilities are endless because you can send MIDI out. You can control anything that MIDI can control. I've controlled my entire team's patch settings on their keyboards, on their pedal boards. I've controlled all lighting transitions. I can control Pro Presenter slides. I've controlled video content cues. I've done everything on Ableton. It can create an absolute seamless, undistracting production. A production that people notice is a distraction to worship. A production that people just kind of don't notice, and it just becomes the environment in which they can worship. Those are the environments that we want. Sometimes they can be big, sometimes they need to be really small, but we can use music technology to kind of create those distraction-free environments. Nothing is worse than when Pro Presenter lyrics come on the screen late, right? That the church doesn't sing. You could rehearse every transition the best you can with the band, and you can hit all your notes on pitch, and if you don't put the first 3 words to Come Thou Fount on the screen, people are like, oh, I don't know this song. And then they come in late and they don't sing. So you can use music technology to solve that. right? You do whatever you want with this. So I have people that have their MIDI boards, and I'm like, okay, they tell me, hey, I've programmed all of my patches. They go in order of, and the MIDI you'd use notes. So they go in, F0, F sharp 0, G0, G sharp 0. Those are my patches. And then I'll plug in those MIDI notes. And then when we play the song, his patches just change form and he just plays guitar. So you can do anything you want with this. And I kind of go to an obsessive level of detail on this. But it's because it frees up my musicians to focus on what's important. I don't want them worrying about, where they're at in the song. I don't want them worried about dang, how can I make this transition with my gear? I want them focused on leading God's people in worship. And so if I can alleviate some of that with some just basic behind the scenes, well, maybe not basic, it gets advanced, but if I can eliminate some of this with some music technology, then yeah, it's worth the effort. So whether you're just starting out with in-ears and you just need to get your drums and your band a little bit tighter, or you go full blown and you're trying to add, other creative sonic elements and you're trying to produce some of the other things, everything is possible. I've seen churches run their lyrics on Ableton as small as 300 people. So please do not hear that's only Hillsong churches do this stuff. Every kind of church can use this. It's just whether you choose to learn it or not. I've been doing this since church plant days, doing variations of this kind of stuff. So don't be afraid of using it. It's not a big little church kind of thing. It's not a big production, small production kind of thing. It's just a tool to create undistracting environments so we can lead people in worship. That's what we're called to do. So we want to keep the attention on that. Cool. All right. I'll take 5 minutes of question. I think we have 5 minutes left. Yeah.
Your email address.
My email address is Eric, ERIC, at thisisvillagechurch.com. Thisisvillagechurch.com. If you don't want to write it down now, you can also just look it up on our website too. So it's there. But yeah, feel free. Hit me up anytime. I love this stuff. So if you have questions, want to ask custom, hey, here's the scenario in my church. Here's what I'm interested in doing. I'm not a salesman for Ableton, so I'm not trying. If you just need help, you have a vision for your church, and you're this is what I want to accomplish. If I can help you, I'll do that. I'm not trying to sell you on more or less technology, but if you need help, I'm here to help. Cool. Any other questions?
Is there a way of I got a guy on my team who's totally married to Logic, right? And so
yeah.
It would be difficult to, and he's my music director guy that you're talking about, right? And he's really in love with those string sounds that you can get from Logic. He bought this really expensive strings package, and would you be able to somehow transfer those over into Ableton, or?
Yes, Ableton and Logic use the same protocol for plugins, so he would be able to transfer it over. However, I'm in love with Logic too. Yeah. So I'm kind of showing you how to use Ableton because this is what I use, but I produce all of my backing tracks. I do all of our church recordings. I do all of our demos, resources, everything in Logic. Right. And then I bounce it and import it into Ableton. I find that Logic is a much better producer's flow. It's a better creative flow. Ableton is clunky. This little 2D interface, flat interface, is great if you want to be a Euro DJ. And it's oh man, I'm so hip because I'm using Ableton. That's great. I love Ableton. It's clear, it's easy to use, but it's not great for producing tracks. So I try to use Pro Tools and everything. Okay. Yeah.
So how do you find a good balance in terms of how much you put in a track in a smaller setting? Have you done that in a small context? My church is 50, 60 people.
Yep.
Right? Where you can put some things in a track that doesn't actually take out of the immersion factor because it actually can be distracting if there's too much going on. People are well, where is that sound coming from?
Yeah.
So how do you find a good balance of that?
Yeah. There's kind of a both and thing where, people will get over the fact that they're hearing sounds. You'd be surprised as a musician how much people don't care that they're hearing stuff that they don't see on stage. And so I wouldn't be afraid of using a lot of stuff in there. However, you're totally right. If you're like putting arena-size sounding drums in the backing track with like Marshall full stacks, you know, AC/DC kind of stuff, and then you're playing like your acoustic guitar like Matt Redman, yeah, you're gonna have sonic dissonance. And so you by asking the question, you know exactly what to do, I think, because you know the heart of your church, you know the feel of the church. I just led worship by myself at Village Church, just an acoustic guitar. That's it. It was just me and acoustic guitar, no other vocalists, no other bands. I didn't use any tracks for that because I didn't need it. But other times I've led by myself and I put some tracks behind. I put some atmospheric pads that would come in like 2/3 of the way through the song. Everybody's singing, and then it just slowly comes in. They don't even know. They don't even realize. But suddenly it just lifts the spirit in the room. I don't mean the literal spirit. I mean just the atmosphere of the, you know, like. So yeah, don't be afraid, man. I do things like I'll lead with small ensembles, like acoustic guitar, piano, and a cello, and then I'll put some things in the backing tracks, like low end, like 30 hertz, just subtle nudges. So at the beginning of a chorus, when I'm playing and we build up and we sing the chorus, and just, and it just, you feel it. And it just brings out, oh man, we've arrived at this chorus and we can sing it together, right? So it's being artistic. You know, you have to be musical. If you get hired to do a coffee shop gig, you know, you're not bringing your Les Paul and your Mesa Boogie, right? So it's the same thing in worship with backing tracks. You know, definitely play to the room. Yeah, great question. Cool.
Time for one more question.
One more question. Yeah.
You're doing a loop or a backing track for tech even.
Yeah.
And things start to go sideways.
Yeah, this is a good question.
Especially when you've got the whole mix and the congregation singing, it's hard to hear it sometimes and you lose it.
Mm-hmm.
When do you bail? Or do you bail? Or how do you gracefully exit and then continue on so it's not disruptive?
Yeah, so if the backing tracks, if them cutting out disrupts worship, that's probably too many backing tracks. So that sounds crazy coming from somebody who says they put 120 tracks in a track. But when I say 120 tracks, I'm really selective about how it's supporting and how it's filling out the sound, and not just becoming the replacement band, right? So if the tracks bail in my scenario, maybe some people notice, but it's more just that the overall room loses a little bit of energy. If something's going wrong and you're going to be off the backing track, you kill it. That's the rule. Kill it right away. So we have signals where we're just like, kill it. They're usually like this. Yeah, so we kill it right away. Now, here's the scenario, because some you guys might want to run backing tracks because we don't have a bass player for the day. Well, you weren't going to have a bass player anyway. So if you get off and the bass, you just cut it out, you know, that's unfortunate, you know, so you just kind of have to suck that one up, like just like any other worship set where you're like, dang, we didn't hit the notes and it was distracting, you know, it's you're hitting it 95% of the time. If you're like getting off the backing track and the multi-tracks like 1 out of every 4 times, you shouldn't be doing multi-tracks. It should only be if like maybe there's some random computer glitch, or just like somebody dropped their pick and then just totally got off. Like, it should be that rare occurrence, and then you just kill it and you just go, man, that was unfortunate that we lost it. But if you have a full band and you're just using this stuff to support and add, it will feel like a little energy gets lost in the room, but it's weird. The average person won't even notice, right? Because it's felt, not heard. So yeah, that'd be my best. Thank you guys so much. Please email me. Man, good luck in your endeavors.